الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. It is so unfortunate that just as the Muslims were winning the battle of Uhud, because of a mistake, a disobedience from the part of the archers, that this victory had almost turned into a defeat for the Muslims. Though the Prophet ﷺ instructed the archers not to descend from the mountain until they get a clear directive from him ﷺ to do so, no matter what happens, yet once they saw the army of the polytheist escape the battlefield, they wanted this worldly life. They wanted the booty. They wanted to get all what they can get along with their brother soldiers. So they disobeyed the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ. And as a result, their victory almost turned into a defeat. Khalid ibn al-Walid, with the riders alongside him, went from behind the Muslims to the mountain of the archers, killed the 10 remaining Muslims who were defending the army, and then started to attack the Muslims from behind. And he called his brethren from the polytheist to come back and fight again. They realized that he managed and he succeeded to go from behind the Muslims, so they all came and they attacked the Muslims once again. The Muslims, amidst the chaos, were confused. Some of them threw their swords and just sat down without fighting, because they heard that the Prophet ﷺ was killed. Others started fighting whomever they saw in front of them, to the extent that they even killed some of the companions, not recognizing that they were also Muslims. Others were in despair and thought of going to the hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubay, to ask him to intercede with Abu Sufyan so that he would spare their lives. Others fled the battlefield altogether and went to Medina. And Allah Azza wa Jal has described all of these as the believers in the Quran. And He also had granted them forgiveness. So there's no excuse for anyone to come and accuse them of treason or of being coward or of doing something that was wrong. It was wrong. Allah Azza wa Jal blamed them for that, but He also told us that He had forgiven their sins. Of course, when the Prophet saw this, ﷺ, he had only two choices. Either he would flee the battlefield and go to Medina to regroup and get another army and save himself and those who were with him. And he had only 9 men with him. And as we know, he was at the back of the army. Khalid was the closest one with his knights and riders. And they were faster than anyone else because they had horses, and the Prophet had a camel, and his companions were on foot. Yet there was a chance for the Prophet ﷺ to escape the battle, but this meant that he would abandon his companions. The second choice, which was the hardest, was for him to remain, to call his companions to regroup around him, and then unite once again. and the Prophet chose the second choice. He called among the companions, "Come to me, servants of Allah." They recognized the voice, so they all went back to the Prophet ﷺ. But the polytheists were closer, so they started attacking the Prophet ﷺ and those who were with him. We mentioned before that 7 of the Ansar, each one of them fought bravely, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Who would defend us, and Allah Azza wa Jal will make him on the Day of Judgment with me in paradise." And this is all what we live for. Our lives in this world is just a passing through phase, and our final destination is paradise. So for them, this is what you're living for, so might as well die for it. Because if you compare life to the hereafter, it's like comparing a drop of water to the oceans. And again, the comparison is not in its place, because life is maximum 60, 70, 100 years that you're going to spend on this world. But on the hereafter, it's infinity. There is no ending to it. So they all fought one by one, bravely, until they died at the feet of the Prophet ﷺ. And then the remaining 2 from the Muhajirin, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas and Talha ibn Ubaidillah, fought even harder until they were wounded so bad defending the Prophet ﷺ and attacking the enemy armies. Talha ibn Ubaidillah, they found more than 39 wounds in him, protecting the Prophet ﷺ, taking all the swords and the arrows and the spears that came in his direction, covering the Prophet, shielding the Prophet with his body. The polytheists, some of them came from behind the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them threw stones at the Prophet, so he fell on his side and he broke one of his teeth and his head was wounded and he started bleeding. One of them hit him with a spear, but it could not go through, but it had 2 of the rings of the shield that he has on the helmet go into his cheek, and it started also bleeding. One of them hit the Prophet on his shoulder with a sword, but because of the shield it did not go through and penetrate, but it affected his shoulder for a whole month. It was very tensed, and they were walking a very thin line, but they had no choice. This is the message of Allah, and they have to fight for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Came Abu Bakr and Abu Ubaidah, were the first to arrive, and they started defending the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Ubaidah saw these rings in the Prophet's cheek, and he wanted to take them out. He couldn't. So he grabbed them with his teeth, and he pulled them, and 2 of his teeth fell on this process. Imagine the pain and agony they were in, only to protect the Prophet ﷺ. What kind of love they had in their hearts. They would sacrifice themselves.
I believe that the school which they learned in it, which is the Prophet's school, ﷺ, give them that education which they believed 100% in their hearts that it's only one choice, Jannah.
Well, this is every Muslim's choice. This is what we all live for. Why do you think we abandon lots of the things that non-Muslims enjoy? Aren't we men? Don't we want to enjoy what they are enjoying? Don't we want to gain money, whether it's by cheating, usury, killing people, whatever? Why don't we abuse people? Why don't we commit adultery? Why don't we drink intoxicants? Why don't we lie? Why aren't we hypocrites? Why don't we do this and that? Because Allah tells us, don't do this, and at the end you are going to end up in paradise. And Allah mentions in the Holy Quran that whoever is turned away from hell and who is allowed to enter paradise, then he has won. So Allah Azza wa Jal defines winning for us. It's not to have a beautiful wife. It's not to have a beautiful house and a car. It's not to have a fat and wealthy bank account. It's not to be handsome. It's not to be healthy. The winning aspect is that you do not enter hell and you enter paradise. And this can only happen if you follow, if you submit your will to the will of Allah Azza wa Jal, and if you follow the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet then was rescued, in a sense, by 10 of his bravest companions. They all came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and they went to one side of the hill of Uhud, and they got their back to it, and they started fighting and defending the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Abu Sufyan and Khalid bin al-Walid tried with some soldiers and knights to ride over the mountain and descend over the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet saw them and told Umar, they should not be on top of us. No non-Muslim should be on top of us. So Umar went with few of his companions, and they managed to get them down. And this shows you how brave Umar and how strong Umar is, to the extent that he got Khalid ibn Walid and Abu Sufyan to descend from the mountain, unable to achieve what they came for. Ibn Qami'ah, may Allah have all his wrath and punishment on him. He's the one that hit the Prophet ﷺ on his back. And he kept on fighting and fighting until he saw the man who was holding the flag of the Muslims, Mus'ab ibn Umair. Because Mus'ab looked like the Prophet ﷺ, he attacked him. He chopped one of his hands. Mus'ab took the flag with his left. He chopped the other one. Mus'ab took the flag with his chest to the ground. He killed Mus'ab ibn Umair. Once he killed him, he thought that he had succeeded in killing the Prophet ﷺ. So he shouted in the mushrikeen, I've managed to kill the Prophet ﷺ. What do you think happened? Because he shouted at the mushrikeen, their intensity of attack went down, because they felt that they have achieved their objective.
Succeeded.
Yes. This meant that the Muslims had a very good chance to regroup again, because the intensity of the attacks were reduced. And that's what happened. Umar ibn Khattab wanted to shout back and say, you are a liar, he's not dead. So the Prophet told him, shh, don't talk. Let them think that they've killed me until we regroup. What happened after that is, inshallah, what we will learn after the break. Stay tuned, and inshallah we will be right back.
Welcome to Tech Talk. I'm your host, Omar Shear. This season of Tech Talk, we will focus specifically on the internet.
A student would type their paper, and instead of handing me a hard copy of their paper, they would upload it to this learning system, this e-learning system.
I have some great experience when it comes to technology, and in particular, internet technology. Call to action is something that we do in our day-to-day lives, and maybe we don't realize it. Now we want to discuss, after you have a product and you have a website and you have a way to communicate with your customers, which would be your email marketing system, now it's time to take the money from the customer.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. The polytheists thought that they've managed and succeeded to kill the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So the attacks were reduced, and they felt in a way that their objective has been achieved. 30 of the Prophet's companions alayhi salatu wasalam, managed to gather around him. So now they were a unit, a strong unit, and they were fighting bravely to defend the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. While they were surrounding him, Ubay ibn Khalaf, one of the leaders of the mushrikeen, came through wanting to kill the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam with a spear, saying that I will not be spared if I spare him. I will not be spared if I spare Muhammad. I want to kill him. And all what the Prophet ﷺ did was to say to his companions, move away, let him come. And he came in full armor. You could not see anything of him except his eyes. And as he was approaching like a raging bull to the Prophet ﷺ, one thing was in his mind. He remembered few years ago or few months ago that the Prophet ﷺ allowed Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, may Allah be pleased with him, to go and make Umrah. And at the time, the Ansar were in truce with the mushriks, the polytheists. Wars did not break up yet, but they knew that they were Muslims. So Sa'd ibn Mu'adh went to Mecca for Umrah, and he sought what we call in Arabic the neighborship, or the refuge of one of the leaders of Mecca. And he told him, okay, but let us not make Umrah except in the afternoon time where everybody is taking their nap, so that we don't want to cause any confusion and disturbance. So he agreed. And when he went to make Tawaf and Umrah, Ubay ibn Ka'b saw him. Ubay ibn Khalaf saw him. And he said, this disbeliever is performing Tawaf in peace? How dare he? So, and he started shouting at him. Actually, I made a mistake. It was Ubay ibn Khalaf who gave Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, his ally, this neighborhood or this refuge. And it was Abu Jahl who came and objected. How does this disbeliever perform Tawaf in this haram? So Sa'd started shouting back at him. Ubay ibn Khalaf, though he is Sa'd's ally, because Abu Jahl's prominent place in Quraysh, told him, don't raise your voice, Sa'd, because Abu Jahl is the leader of Quraysh. He's the leader of this valley. So Sa'd ibn Mu'adh got fed up with his friend and told him, do shut your mouth, because I've heard the Prophet ﷺ say that he will kill you. And he left back to Medina. And this was going on in Ubay ibn Khalaf's head. In the battlefield, when the Muslims looked so weak and vulnerable, he wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ. So he charged like a raging bull with this idea in his mind. The Prophet said, he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me, but I'm going to kill him first. And as he approached the Prophet ﷺ, and the companions had to adhere to the Prophet's orders, leave me with him. As he reached the Prophet ﷺ with a spear, saw a point just below his neck that was not covered with the shield, and he just tipped him away with it. He didn't actually wound him, he just hit him. And the guy fell on his back with a roar to his voice and sound. And he said, Muhammad has killed me. His companions immediately went to him and pulled him away from the Muslims so that they would not finish him off. And Abu Sufyan saw him when they brought him to the wounded. What are you doing? Why are you crying and moaning like a baby? He didn't do anything to you. He said, if this pain in me was in a whole tribe of Quraysh, they would have all died. Muhammad said that he's going to kill me, and he is killing me. He told him, come on, ease it off. There's nothing wrong with you. And 4 days later, he died from this tip and this stroke that the Prophet ﷺ gave him. Ubay ibn Khalaf. Now, the battle is almost over, and the Muslims regrouped with their wounds, and the polytheists also regrouped. The Muslims had 70 casualties, and that's a lot. But 65 of them were from the Ansar, and only 5 from the Muhajirin died. And this tells you that the Muhajirin are far greater warriors than those farmers in Medina. Yet, they both wanted to die at the cause of Allah Azza wa Jal. On the enemy side, about 36 to 40 died from the mushrikeen, from the polytheists. Abu Sufyan, when the battle was almost over, shouted at the people, "Is Muhammad alive?" And they wanted to answer, but the Prophet said, "Don't talk." "Is Abu Bakr alive?" No one spoke. "Is Umar alive?" No one spoke. So Abu Sufyan shouted, "Well, if these people are dead, then there is nothing for us to stay here, because Islam is gone." So Umar could not hold himself, and he shouted, "All of us are alive, you enemy of Allah, and Allah will show you." And he started cursing at him. So Abu Sufyan shouted at them again, and they started exchanging shouts, and he's praising his lords and gods, and the Prophet ﷺ is asking them to answer him by praising Allah alone. And he's telling them that this battle of Uhud is in exchange of the battle, or in return of the battle of Badr.
I don't believe that they won really, because look, how brave Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was talking and shouting at him back, while he is surrounded with 30 people, and he's talking and shouting at over 1,000 or 2,000 of great warriors, and at the same time, like the kuffar or the disbelievers came for killing the Prophet ﷺ, and they couldn't do it. So I believe that no, Badr was like much better.
What do you think, Abdullah?
Obviously, they didn't achieve what they set out to. So,
and their objective was
to kill the Prophet and destroy Islam.
Yes, and they didn't do that.
They didn't do that. So psychologically, they did not achieve that. So they lost really.
And I believe that Islam won that day, because look at the Muslims, when they obeyed Allah and obeyed the God, they got the victory in Badr. But just because one mistake, that they disobeyed the Prophet, so they sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so they learned now that no, they have to follow Islam by following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in order for them to get the victory. Otherwise, they would lose.
Well, the biggest evidence that this battle was not lost by the Muslims is that the polytheist army went back to Mecca. Now, if they were on the winning side, they would not stay, or they would not leave. They would go and advance to Medina, so that they would annihilate anyone else who was still living and kicking, because then things would go back again. But they themselves were so wounded and so hurt, to the extent that they said, well, I think it's better to draw now, as we have the upper hand in a sense.
But how long would in the time and era, how long would a battle normally take?
Well, actually, this battle started early morning, because the Prophet, as you remember, after Fajr, he went from behind them, and it started in like 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, midday, and it stayed up till the night. But imagine 4 hours or 5 hours of continuous fighting and running and climbing up mountains. Imagine, if anybody that plays sports knows this. If you're a squash player and you play for half an hour, you're left breathless if you're playing someone who's good. If you're a boxer and you play 2 rounds or 1 round, that's a lot. If you are a martial artist player, taekwondo or kung fu or karate, if you make a kumite for about half a minute or a minute, just standing would take your breath out. These guys were in full armor. So that's heavy. That's about 40, 50 kgs. And they had swords that was about 20 to 25 kilograms. And they would hit so hard, to the extent that people would split into 2. Imagine the power of these arms. It's not usual. And they would chop a person into two pieces. Even he was wearing the helmet and his fully armor on.
I've heard reports that mankind was much greater in mass and size before. Is that true?
That's true, but not at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. We are told that Adam, peace be upon him, was 60 arm length long. And since then, people were being reduced in size until they've reached this current size. And the time of the Prophet ﷺ is not that far away from us. So they had the same height and the same build, but they did not have the same hearts. So their hearts were much stronger and their physique was much better than ours because they depended entirely on their bodies. They didn't have cars, they didn't have lifts, they didn't have things to help them and aid them like we do at the moment. Abu Sufyan kept on shouting to the Prophet ﷺ and his companion, saying that you will find among your dead ones mutilations that I did not approve of. And you remember Abdullah bin Jahsh, his nose and his ears were cut off and put in a string. And that's what they used to do with the dead Muslims. They used to go and chop their noses and ears and put them in a string, so that when their loved ones come and see them, they would be afraid to fight with them later on. And also we learned that they've also cut open the belly of lots of those who were dead. So Abu Sufyan says that you will find mutilations that I did not approve of, but it did not bother me. In the sense, it's okay for me. And this meant that the Battle of Uhud was over and that the Muslims were again back on the weak side among the Arab tribes and among the polytheists. But this was not the case, as we will learn inshallah when we meet next time. And until then, fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Mm-hmm.